This video will explain when information surreptitiously obtained will give rise to an obligation of confidence. An obligation of confidence can be inferred or imposed by the court in circumstances where confidential information has been surreptitiously obtained. By surreptitiously obtained, we are referring to information that, for example, has been obtained without the consent of the owner of the information, or obtaining the information without a person's knowledge. One of the earliest cases to recognise that equity will operate in this area is Ashburton and Pape. In that case, it was held that equity will restrain the publication of confidential information improperly obtained, or information imparted in confidence which ought not be divulged. So there are two elements to consider. Is the information confidential, and has it been improperly or surreptitiously obtained? The focus is on establishing that the recipient of the information had knowledge that the information was confidential. That can be established from the manner in which the recipient obtained the information, for example, by copying information from a computer without the owner's knowledge. This approach is different to the normal approach to establishing an obligation of confidence. Normally, the inquiry is directed at whether or not the circumstances give rise to an obligation of confidence by looking at the way that the owner imparted the information. This area continues to develop, and there have been several statements of this principle by the courts. For example, in Saltman Engineering, the principle was stated to be that if a person had A. used confidential information, B. directly or indirectly obtained from the plaintiff, C. without the plaintiff's consent, that person will be guilty of infringement of the plaintiff's rights. In Attorney General and Guardian newspapers No. 2 and Moorgate Tobacco, it was stated that a duty of confidence will arise if A. confidential knowledge, B. comes to the knowledge of a person, C. that person has knowledge of the fact that the information is confidential, and D. it would be just in all the circumstances to restrain disclosure of the information. There is some confusion in this area regarding the elements that are needed to establish an obligation of confidence in relation to improperly obtained information. That stems in part from an attempt to apply ordinary principles which impose an obligation of confidence in circumstances where the information is improperly obtained by a third party. One of the ordinary elements requires that the confidential information is imparted in circumstances imposing an obligation of confidence. It is arguably difficult for someone to impart information when it is obtained surreptitiously from the party communicating it. I'll explain with an example. In Malone and Metropolitan Police Commissioner, it was held that an obligation of confidence could be readily imposed on a recipient of information who is told by the owner that the information is confidential. However, that obligation did not extend to someone who secretly recorded that information through a phone tap. The owner has expressly told the recipient of the information that the information is confidential, but that does not create a relationship of confidence with the person who recorded the conversation. It is important to ensure that this ground is not used to establish a breach of confidence in actions involving improperly obtained information. Rather than looking to a breach of confidence action, Australian courts have considered and applied Ashburton and Pape and subsequently established that there are two distinct limbs when it comes to protecting confidential information. One is confidential information improperly obtained, on the one hand, and information imparted in confidence. So the key issues to consider are the manner in which the information is obtained, knowledge that the information is confidential, and that the information is confidential in nature. Don't confuse information imparted to a recipient, which gives rise to an obligation of confidence, with information improperly obtained.